Hello again for the third time this week. We're back with another emergency-ish episode. Um, we're gonna go theater room talk today. So still TT, but still not in the truck. The truck is still in the shop, by the way. It's going on 2 months now since it's been in there. Some recalls had to be done, and I still do not have my truck back. So I'm still in the rental vehicle for the time being, and just kind of making do with that for just until further notice, I guess, till the dealership calls us back. But just obviously, there was some news today, as most of you already know. Texas has relieved Tom Herman of his duties as the head coach of the program, which you know, not shocking to anybody. It's well documented that it was on the horizon. And not only a possibility, but pretty much a more than done or a as good as done scenario for Tom Herman and the University of Texas. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about, before we get to the coaching news, is first of all Sam Ehlinger. There was more breaking news earlier this week, and it's crazy that him declaring for the 2021 NFL draft isn't the biggest news of the week for the program. So that just kind of shows you how crazy of a week it's been. They win a bowl game in exciting fashion, and what turned out to be Tom Herman's last hoorah. And then a couple days later, Sam officially makes his announcement for the 2021 draft. A lot of people thought he was going to come back. I said that in the middle of that game. Actually, I was watching it, listening to Mike Golick, by the way, awesome analyst, and I wish we were going to get more of him calling games, but it doesn't look like. I was talking to Chris about it. We both were just kind of blown away at how brilliant he is and how easy the call comes to him, and just the way that he's able to kind of keep fans engaged, even in a blowout win. Like, he was just constantly, putting out very intricate details and information, and that's why I'm sitting here watching this Oregon game, Oregon and Iowa State from afar right now, just trying to listen to him call what I guess Chris was saying is going to be his last game. He and his wife are just kind of looking forward to retirement and moving on and seeing what the next chapter of life, I guess, has in store for them. But anyways, wish Golick the best of luck as well. But just back to Sam, so the main thing with him is that first of all, when he got injured, they showed a replay of that hit that he took, and it kind of looked like he was, dangling his shoulder a little bit as he walked to the sideline. Well, he's kind of got that tough reputation, like the reputation of toughness. And so my initial thought, and I think I posted it on a couple of my social media outlets and texted a few of my group chats, like, I think if it was telling when Sam left the game that he was going to be foregoing his blanket waiver, extra year of eligibility at UT that was granted by the NCAA, and entering the NFL draft because of him, leaving the game early. Like, I just thought that, given what we know about him as a person, his character, his toughness, his, all that stuff, like, if he were to be coming back next year and not worrying about being healthy going into, the draft preparation process, he'd be toughing his way through that game and finishing it out. So to me, that was just kind of the telltale sign. The fact that he didn't try to come back in first and just see if he could give it a go. Like, they just immediately shut it down. He went to the locker room early, and basically came back out of the locker room with his street clothes on. So tough to see him go. I rooted for the kid and was a strong advocate for him during his entire tenure here at Texas. I just thought that he brought and offered some stability to the program that we hadn't seen basically since Colt McCoy left. He was obviously a Longhorn lifer. We all know the story about his history as a fan and just, growing up in Austin, and basically he was committed to Texas from the time he was, able to walk and talk, right? That was just his dream school, and following in his father's footsteps. So just all that stuff, just a great overall story, and I obviously wish him the best moving forward. I don't expect him to be a high pick, but I think he realizes that his ceiling has already been kind of capped in the college football realm, and the longer he kind of stays there, scouts are going to get a better idea that they're seeing the best of Sam has already kind of occurred, just because, there was always I always knew that there were certain limitations within Sam's game that were gonna not necessarily handicap, but kind of just, I guess, hold the offense back a bit. And particularly the main one was just his inability to consistently deliver the deep ball and just accurately throwing the ball down the field. I think guys like Lil Jordan Humphrey, 6'5", 6'5" receiver, massive wingspan target, just a rangy guy just from his build and his size. And same thing with Colin Johnson, 6'6". Both those guys are pros now, playing on Sundays. And just I think those guys, those bigger target guys, sort of masked Sam's deficiencies throwing the football, I guess, just because of their catch radius was so big, and so it just made the margin of error that much wider. Like Sam didn't have to be as technical and as precise throwing the football. So just having those big targets, I think, kind of maybe masked some of those deficiencies. But those with all that being said, like taking that into consideration, I also too thought like the reason why I backed him and supported him and just kind of fought for him, whether that be just online or with my friends or just talking to people in the general public like that I run into on a daily basis. It was like I thought that his experience, his leadership, his toughness, all that stuff like would kind of more than make up for whatever on the field deficiencies or weakness in his game that you want to throw out there. But I guess watching that game on Tuesday night, that bowl game, and seeing the Texas coach team under Tom Herman without Sam for the first time in meaningful minutes, in a game where it's not like a blowout and Casey Thompson or Hudson Card or whoever just comes in and gets a couple snaps to turn around and hand the ball off to finish the game just to run clock. This was actually a situation where Casey Thompson still had a game that they had to go win. He had to come in and take all those years of preparation to come in and win the game. Well, we saw for the first time without Sam Ehlinger what a Tom Herman offense could potentially look like. And so that was exciting to me, and that's kind of why it was like somewhat caught off guard, I guess, by the news today. It was well, given that result and seeing what we saw, of course, you can't put too much stock into a game like that, right? So got to be careful there, what you wish for, I guess. But I was like, well, maybe all this time I've been fighting for the wrong person and defending the wrong person. Like the coach is always the first one to get blamed for lack of team success. And most of the time, rightfully so, right? Certain outlier instances. But, to me, it's just seeing the offense grow literally in an instant when somebody else that is more of a precise, I guess, deep ball thrower, and just seeing him come in and like Casey Thompson is the person I'm referring to, come in and just radiate with confidence and just kind of take the game over and literally take national news and media by storm in an instant, right? Like just coming in and confidently running the offense, showing the poise, the pocket presence, and then just the ability to make plays both with his arm and with his legs. Like you saw the athleticism and the quickness that he was able to evade pressure and sacks that Sam may have otherwise not been able to do. But so just when you have those type of things and you take those things into consideration, your brain just starts going, at least for me anyway, it's just a million miles an hour, weighing all the different what ifs of what could this program be. And so just anytime you see stability or you see continuity from one specific position, change is always going to seem like as if it's the more appealing option, right? So it's like it's exciting to see Sam go because it's something new. Like we know what the offense is, we know what he is as a player, we've seen the ceiling. Well, now that Texas team, that product that I saw on both sides of the football, I haven't seen that in honestly maybe 10 years, truthfully. Now, I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to let those emotions get the best of me, as I have been guilty of doing and have been made a fool of for it in the past. I've learned my lesson on, putting too much hype and too much stock into bowl games. and just letting that, I guess, the that fallout carry into the next season, So it's like there's always these expectations with this program, and it seems like we've always seemed to fall short. So with that, I'll let that be my transition into the Tom Herman talk. So that's the reason why. Some people say, well, he's won 4 bowl games. Been at Texas for 4 years, 4-0 in bowl games. Didn't have a losing season. Had a 10-win season once. Won a New Year's Six bowl once, and then 3 other bowls. So 4-0 in bowl games, and then the recruiting classes. 2 top 5 recruiting classes, 3 in the top 10. Just all that stuff. People are like, well, just give it time, give it time, give it time. Well, the problem with that is Texas fans and Texas boosters and the big money donors that we've talked about in the past. Time is not on any coach's side. The time to be patient is over for this university and for this fan base and for just the program, right? There's no more patience. It doesn't exist. And, us as fans, we're kind of, kind of fed up with it too. It's like all these expectations are brought in and we're constantly fed, ooh, top 10 recruiting class. Ooh, coach with national championship coordinator coach is coming in. He's going to be the savior. The sky's the limit. Well, all that's fine and dandy, but until you start seeing consistent W's being put up and consistently competing for conference championships, then it's not going to be good enough. And that's the reality here. So like while Tom Herman didn't, he was never as bad as Charlie Strong was in his tenure, right? There was some improvement. We saw improvements both, in the recruiting cycle and even on the field, winning a New Year's Six bowl, being in a Big 12 championship game, even though they lost, right? Those were 2 big pluses in one season. And then, beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. I was actually at that game. So, I bought into the hype, right? And Texas did too. They extended Tom Herman after that game, gave him a 2-year contract extension. And now that's why they're having to pay $15 million today to fire him. So, while it does kind of suck to see to think about all the progress that was, made more or less in his time, just to kind of see that go, and him acknowledging that this was his dream job ever since he was a child, or since he began his coaching career, and then just to kind of have that ripped away. Yeah, it sucks, but then you think about the possibilities of what could be with a new coach, similar to the whole quarterback with Sam situation, right? The newness is always kind of bliss. And, just as fans, that's part of it. You're forever going to have to just buy into the hype and support the program and whatever it does. But, Tom ultimately never came in and won the games against the teams that he was supposed to beat. And Tom never won a Big 12 title. So 4 years in, that's just the reality. That's the world we live in, So $15 million. Wouldn't shock me if he's got a new offensive coordinator job here in the next, few weeks or so. Probably going to go be for another national championship contender and, do the same thing that he did. He won a national title in 2015 as the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, right? But guess what? Having a nice reputation, or just like being a highly successful coordinator at the college football level, does not make you a legitimate head coach. It doesn't necessarily translate and mean that you're going to have the same success as a head coach. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, to go from coordinator position when you have one job, as good as you may be at building an offense and just putting together architecture for how you want your system to look, right? And installing that system and making it efficient and all these things, right? To all of a sudden not only have that on your plate, but then you've got to run a program, and you're literally in charge of everything from hiring your staff, your support staff. That's huge. In my opinion, the most underrated aspect of college football is your support staff, which is, goes exactly to my point of saying that just because you're a highly competitive or a highly successful coordinator, that doesn't translate always to making you a great head coach. It's just the reality of of the stresses that go along with that position. And so that kind of leads me into Steve Sarkisian, right? So you can't mention his name without acknowledging his mental health, or just his alcohol abuse, right? That he struggled with and been very open about in the past. Steve Sarkisian has not been successful as a head coach. He doesn't have that pedigree, that championship caliber pedigree as a head coach, and we've seen what happens, right? So USC, we know about his time there. It was a massive failure, but we also know that his time there was basically destroyed by his struggles off of the field and away from the facility with alcoholism. And so there's obviously people are going to criticize the move just for that reason alone, without acknowledging or accepting that if this was still a problem and something that he struggled with. I mean, do you really think Nick Saban goes and makes that hire, and entrusts his program that's perennial powerhouse national championship contender every single year, and the dominance that they put on television every Saturday? Like, do you really think a guy like Nick Saban, as hard-nosed as he is, as competitive as he is, as legendary as he is going to entrust a guy that he isn't confident, that's gone out of his way to make sure that he's putting himself, putting his health off the field, or away from the facility, and making that a priority to get that fixed before he brings a guy like that in and trusts him to help run that program? No, the answer is no. So Nick Saban, the fact that he was, he made that decision, he brought him in, and now we're seeing success. That that's comforting to know that if he were coming from anywhere else in the country, maybe aside from let's say Dabo Swinney under his wing at Clemson, you have major question marks. But just the fact that the best college football program in America trusted this guy, and we're seeing that trust pay off, so that's comforting. That tells me a lot about where he's at now and how far he's come since the disaster that was his head coaching tenure at USC, right? So again, that's how I rationalize that. It's like, if you're struggling with that, what we know he was struggling with at the time, you can't expect somebody to have any success at such a highly stressful, highly just demanding position of being the head coach at one of the college football blue blood programs in America, being at USC. So at the time, we didn't understand why he was such a failure, but seeing he was the replacement in Atlanta for Kyle Shanahan, who's one of the brighter offensive minds, and the fact that we saw Steve be the candidate, given all of his struggles that were brought to light by all of the national media, and then they were willing to take that step there as well. It just kind of tells me a lot. Like, that's not something that really concerns me anymore. And so you're just gonna have to trust that he's doing all the things that he has said that he is, and that he's just continuing to prioritize his health and I guess walk that alcohol-free battle for the rest of his life and throughout his tenure at Texas, right? So that's something that he's obviously going to struggle with. I think he's said that in the past. It's going to be something that he deals with forever. But I think what he's done in the past 2 to 3 years kind of just, it says a lot about who he is as a person, and how strong how strong he is mentally, and how he's had to, just deal with and overcome a lot of things. And then where Alabama is at right now, the state of their offense that he's got them in, with for the first time ever, I believe, three Heisman finalists from one team, being, Alabama's QB1, RB1, and wide receiver 1, right? Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, and Najee Harris. So, that's exciting, right? Just seeing the success that Alabama's had, and reading message boards from the Roll Tide faithful who are openly acknowledging that they believe, and they have heard people within the program say, and that Steve Sarkisian is the best offensive coordinator that Nick Saban has ever had. So that just kind of shows you a lot right there. And to me, just kind of when you hear stuff like that, again, being a highly successful offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator does not make you a great college football head coach. But with just what we know about just everything that he's overcome and just being in the position that he's in right now, it just tells me a lot. And I think the same can be said for Chris Del Conte, right? I trust him to make the right decision for, in this instance, and basically, put his faith and his confidence in a guy like Sark to come over and hopefully get the program back to the level that it needs to be and that it's capable of being. It's just, to me, it feels only like it's a matter of time. But, again, recruiting is one thing, but the two most important things, and there's 50% of each of these components in college football. You've got to recruit, and then you've got to develop talent, player development. That's something that Texas hasn't done. They're getting all these blue blood, these blue chip prospects. And, I think there's only 4 teams in the country who have a higher blue chip composite ranking than Texas does. And that's Alabama, that's Georgia, that's Ohio State, and maybe one more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But you're getting all these blue chip prospects and this talent, but what's it getting you? Nothing. The answer is nothing. And those guys aren't being put into the NFL. Those guys aren't, they're not turning themselves or being helped to be developed into a top overall pick. When's the last time we saw a Texas offensive lineman or a defensive end or anybody go in the first round? And I think the answer is Malcolm Brown from the 2013 draft. He went 32nd overall to the Patriots. And then before that, I couldn't even tell you. So I think that's going to change this year. Hopefully Joseph Osai gets a chance early in the first round. And there's a couple other guys who have pretty good grades and expectations going into the NFL. But, so just that's kind of where I'm at in that situation. And a couple other things here that I want to make sure and make clear. There have been issues, and what it's been brought to light for me. I've paid very close attention to when coaches are brought in. I don't want their support staff, their assistant coaches, to be built and founded upon comfort and their guys from within their circle. I don't want you to go hire your best friend to be your defensive coordinator. I don't want you to go hire your dad's college or your dad's high school teammates or your dad's college teammates coach. I don't want you to go. I don't want these personal ties to be the reason for going out and selecting your assistant coaching staff. That just gets you in trouble, and especially when the biggest issue for me, why I was trying to rationalize keeping Tom Herman, is because I knew that we would get an extra year of Chris Ash, the defensive coordinator, Coleman Hutzler, the linebackers coach, Oscar Giles, the defensive ends, the defensive line coach. I knew we were going to get another year of at least having Chris Ash as the defensive coordinator with everybody underneath him. That basically from weeks, I think 6 on, so the last 5 to 6 games of the season, Texas was a top 8 defense in the country in terms of yards and points allowed per game. Maybe even higher than that after the bowl game. I don't know if that's even weighted. I'll have to go back and check, but that was one of the things that really stood out to me was with different quarterback, maybe Tom's offense flourishes a little bit more with Mike Yurcich, the familiarity there, at the way that, or the success that he had at Ohio State as well. And I was just thinking there's continuity. This will be the first time I think ever that, since Mac Brown that Texas has brought back quarterback, offensive coordinator, head coach, defensive coordinator, and support staff. Like having that continuity amongst the four most important, head coach, OC, DC, quarterback, the four most important positions in college football. Having 2 consecutive years of that same combination hasn't happened since at least before 2013 that I know of for a fact. So I was just excited about the potential to have that back. You get past all the COVID stuff and the defense, like with a new system, a new coordinator, not really understanding, all of their roles and, just going out there flying around. And instead they were just kind of, guessing. And, we saw that the defense struggled a little bit. It was more of the same that it was, recent history. But they had that time to figure it out and to get working, to get clicking, and we saw the capability and we saw the jump, the massive jump just in the defensive line play, the constant pressure. Like, it was stuff that I hadn't seen in a long, long time. So that was exciting to me, and that was why that I was kind of trying to rationalize again. Maybe if Tom Herman stays, at least we get to keep the defensive staff together as well. So I say all that to say this: new guy comes in. Please don't necessarily just start hacking away and just getting rid of all of the old staff, all the old guys that, those who have been there under a different head coach's tenure. Just please, I want to give credit to Fanatic Perspective. He said this too, and he kind of reinforced the idea, like, do your due diligence and make sure that the guys that are currently on staff aren't what you're looking for in determining your assistant coaching staff as well. Make sure that, do your due diligence. Make sure that there's just make sure that it's not somebody that you're going to regret letting go of. Because I can tell you right now, just being on Twitter and following some of the people that I follow, like players in particular, they're kind of upset that they woke up, with a new head coach or without a coach, right? They woke up this morning and unbeknownst to them, Tom Herman's gone. Well, a lot of those guys, I can tell you right now, and it's been mostly on the defensive side of the ball, are clamoring and literally reiterating what I'm saying about, like, please, figure out a way, if possible, to bring Chris Ash back. Like, so just that's what I want to make sure that that's one thing that kind of stands out to me is just don't make comfort hires and make sure that whoever's already there isn't who you want to be. And if it's not, right, I'll trust it, whatever. Like, you gotta ultimately let the head coach have freedom to go out and get his guys. Like, otherwise it's pointless to even bring him on. But, I just want to make sure that the fans and just people out there who, if you're watching, just understand, that the support staff, the assistant coaches around the head coach are equally or more important, just from broad spectrum, just in general, recruiting, just holding accountability, in-game management, all that stuff. Like, it's so important and underrated and doesn't get enough talk and credit, in my opinion. So let me pause here. Let me just go over my notes and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I could talk all day about this stuff, but here we go. I think we've pretty much covered it. Like, so there's two support staff names that have been kind of thrown out there already, and just people that I wanted to mention. Kyle Flood, who is the current offensive line coach at Alabama. I think if he comes over, that'd be a huge get for Sarkeesian to bring along. And then Tosh Lupoy is a guy we were talking about in some of my Longhorn buddies chats or the group chat, and we were just kind of saying, Tosh Lupoy, I won't bore you guys with the old or the past successes of names of guys and recruits that he's brought in and been responsible for, but just know that he's widely regarded as a incredibly talented recruiter, and his name carries a lot of weight just in the college football world. And so if you bring a couple of those guys along, just hearing Kyle Flood, who has a great reputation and just from developing offensive linemen and putting offensive linemen into the NFL consistently, and just having that kind of like that connection with Alabama, right? That's another thing too that I kind of wanted to hit on as well. Is like I don't want this hire to be just riding the coattails and attaching, like Texas attaching itself to the name, just to the Alabama brand, right? I pray that that's not what this is. I don't think that's what this is, just based on what I know about Chris Del Conte, who is the current athletic director. But I do not want this to be just like a comfort hire just because we struck out on Urban Meyer, right? That was obviously the name that made the most sense to me, just because I know how difficult it is, and we've seen it too in recent history. The two most recent coaches to come through Texas and be dismissed struggled with the pressure that comes with being the head coach of this program. And the clock is ticking, and everybody is restless. The entire board of constituents, the entire alumni, the fan base, there is zero patience left anymore. So the pressure now is at an all-time high. But we've seen, like, that was another thing that gave me pause and why I trusted really Urban Meyer if we were going to make that move and nobody else, because he has done it. He is proven. He is a proven head coaching commodity and won a national championship as a head coach with two different programs. He's done it. We've seen it. We know that he's capable. Tom Herman didn't have that to his name. Charlie Strong didn't have that to his name. Steve Sarkisian doesn't have that to his name. So there's three things in common with those three guys right now. All highly successful coordinators, but all three are also all highly unsuccessful head coaches at national powerhouse programs, perennial blue bloods, Texas. So Steve Sarkeesian, he's never going to see this. He doesn't care what I think. A lot of people don't, but I'm going to say it anyways. The pressure's on. And I hope that he's ready for that. I trust that he is. I think that he's capable. I think the ceiling that he brings, just given what he's done and just the name value, again, coming from Alabama, leading them to a national championship, having three guys in the same offense that is a top 5 Heisman contender, all those things carry weight. But again, I don't want that to be the reason why Texas made this decision. I want them to make this decision because they feel that it's the right one. They feel that Sarkeesian is ready for it, and they feel that he is, equally or a better hire than even Urban Meyer, which obviously I don't think is possible right now. But I don't want this to be I pray that it's not an issue of Texas making a comfort hire just to say that they did it, just to say that they moved on. So, all that to say this, right? What the talent is there. We've seen the defense make massive strides, leaps and bounds. We've seen what the offense can do. We know that there's talent. We just need somebody to come and be the glue to bring it all together and develop that talent and just be that rock that kind of everything else revolves around. We need consistency. We need win the games that you're supposed to win against the teams that you're supposed to beat. Go compete for a Big 12 title. Go win it. OU has won 6 straight Big 12 titles. It's unacceptable. That should never happen. Should never happen. And it's honestly sad that it does, and that it is happening. So I know I'm forgetting some stuff. I know that there's a lot of things that I wanted to say that I can't. I just can't get it all out there. There's so much kind of going on through my head right now, but I joked about this earlier too. It's funny that in a game as this Iowa State and Oregon game winds down, it's like thinking about A&M getting ready to play one of the biggest, maybe the biggest game in their program's history, and And I just think it's funny that the talking point it's getting drowned out by a Texas coaching change, a Texas coaching hire. I was just joking about that earlier, but Texas is kind of a laughing stock of the Big 12 right now, and for good reason. So they finished the season on a good note, but ultimately it wasn't enough to keep Tom Herman around, and I hope that this move pans out for the best and for the betterment of the program. So be excited to see how it pans out. I'll let all the overreactions commence. And I'll keep sipping my hard to swallow juice over here, and just keep pumping out videos. Just as more and more information comes in, I'll try to do my best to stay on top of it and keep you guys well informed. But this is going on 36 minutes now, so I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a wrap for tonight. But yeah, it's been an exciting and eventful week to be a Texas Longhorn fan, and it's going to be yet another interesting offseason, to say the least. So 2021, we're here. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, rest of your weekend. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you on Monday. Go Cowboys. Okay, one last thing. You guys are going to see the outro actually from the first recording, like from the main segment, before you see this, because I'm terrible at editing and I don't have the patience for it, nor do I have the time really. But this is one of the things that I forgot to hit. I wanted to I went back and realized that I didn't, but I wanted to get this out there as well. So as I joked about just the whole A&M thing, I wanted to also acknowledge too that hearing now, I don't know if you guys may not have heard this. This is kind of being drowned out by the Tom Herman news, but hearing that now Urban Meyer has been reportedly the leading candidate to take over the Jacksonville job for the Jaguars. That stings a little bit. That hurts. And I'll tell you why. It's because basically, seeing that it's more of a pride thing, I guess. After all the hype, all the buildup about him potentially coming over and reviving the program here, to see that he would be more willing and more readily accepting the role of going to an NFL program or an NFL organization right now that's kind of been in similar, constant turmoil as Texas, just kind of, the laughing stock, if you will, of the NFL for the past couple of years. It stings. And so it's like, what are we as a program if that is his resort, right? But I will caveat that with this, and we have to be careful to acknowledge the latter without acknowledging the former, which is given Urban Meyer's history, his health history, right? And the question marks around him, will he come back? Will he coach? Given all that, you have to also understand that, and I said this in the group chat as well with a bunch of my buddies who are, if you guys are watching, you already know what I'm about to say, but as a head coach in the NFL, the expectations and the time, right? The lofty expectations and just the demand that it brings. Those two aren't that different. It's very similar. Long hours, constant demand. It's a round the clock job, more or less. But with the difference though being in college, you've got the whole recruiting aspect that the NFL coaches don't have to worry about, and it's basically like you're working two full-time jobs in one, especially now that the NCAA has added in the early national signing period. So you've got two signing classes within one recruiting class, like two periods that coaches have to focus on and worry about within the same year. So for instance, the 2021 recruiting class at UT, the first go around, all those, half the class, actually in this case it was like 75 to 80%, but all those guys signed in December. Well, Tom Herman and now Steve Sarkisian, he's gonna have to basically pick up and hit the ground running right now and basically get ready and try to reel in and kind of reinvigorate himself with guys that they may have missed on with Tom Herman, and just kind of get the Texas name and brand back out there before the late signing period, the national signing period in February that happens every year. So there's two huge pieces to that puzzle now that we have to consider and acknowledge, and maybe that maybe Urban's family and his doctors and his loved ones, his peers, whatever, his relatives, they feel more comfortable with him taking on a college job or a NFL job before he works his way back into college, just because it's a lot less demanding from a recruiting perspective, and just that some of that stuff can just weigh on you a little bit differently and a little bit heavier. And so maybe they just kind of want to see him crawl before he walks, per se, before he works his way back into the college ranks. And now, with that being said, I also will give credit to a buddy of mine, Dylan Driscoll, who kind of tossed this out there. I kind of added in my own little twist, but he was basically saying, what if Ryan Day was the real candidate who is interested in ultimately being an NFL head coach, and Urban was kind of just stalling, using his name as a stalwart to basically preserve that head coaching spot in Jacksonville so that Ryan Day can take over. Urban goes back to the Big Ten, and basically reunites himself with Ohio State and Columbus, and Ryan Day wants to go coach Jacksonville so he can draft Justin Fields and let that marriage rekindle, and kind of those two guys be the cornerstone pieces of a resurging franchise. So that's obviously a really hot take, a really spicy take that, who knows? I have no reason to believe that that's true. It's just kind of an interesting what if scenario there. So I just wanted to kind of consider that as well. But the timing was kind of weird to me. Just kind of to wrap this all up again, the timing was weird, and that's why initially when I heard the news this morning, I was like, well, that's odd. Like, Alabama's, they're still competing for a national championship. Like, why would Nick Saban give the okay for him to, announce that publicly now? Why would Texas throw that out there and risk basically fumbling the relationship with Sarkeesian, knowing that he's still got something totally different that's equally, much larger on his mind, or much more pertinent now to worry about, and obviously competing for national championship, right? So it's like those things kind of roll through my head too. I'm like, well, why now? It's just kind of an odd time. Like, you'd think that they would at least wait until after the national championship. But I guess what I didn't consider at the time was, like we talked about earlier, recruiting. Like, there's still an urgency that has to be met, even though most of this 2021 class is already it's already inked, it's already done. And there's still names out there that you could potentially go flip, or guys who are hard commits per se to other schools who are national, highly recruited and highly touted, that you can maybe go get. Who knows what kind of weight that Steve Sarkisian's name carries. He's got to basically, in from the get-go, he's got to get out there and hit the recruiting trail and try to revamp and rekindle, I guess, before the 2021 signing class is all said and done in February. And then he's got to get going on the 2022 kids, the juniors, right now. So that's why. But I think I lost my train of thought there. I forgot where I was going with that. But maybe that's why, I guess, the timing. So the timing of it felt weird to me. But then I went and did some more reading and some research, and I was talking to Clay Hickman about this. We were like, he was saying that he feels like moves as such, like the one that happened today with Steve Sarkisian still being a part of a staff that's competing for a national championship, and then somebody being poached from that staff before the season's over. And I was like, I don't ever really recall that happening. I'm sure it has, but I don't know if there's any recent scenario that's happened. It actually turns out, I found out today, that the same program did the same thing in 2016. So it turns out Lane Kiffin was hired by Florida Atlantic in 2016 before their national championship run that year. And Saban basically gave him the okay to go ahead and part ways and do so because of the recruiting aspect, right? Just important to get the ball rolling as soon as possible. So they parted ways there. And then Steve Sarkisian was promoted from interim offensive coordinator to offensive coordinator. So that's an interesting nugget that I totally forgot about, that Steve Sarkisian was basically promoted to a full-time play caller duties in the middle of like the college football playoff. At like after the whole season, it was Kiffin's role, but then Sarkeesian was elevated in the middle of the right before the two biggest games of Alabama's season. So I thought that was a pretty cool nugget. So it turns out that it's not necessarily uncommon, especially not uncommon for a guy like Nick Saban, who, when you're competing for national championships every single year, that's going to happen. Guys are going to get poached. It's the same thing that happens in Super Bowls. You win a Super Bowl, the Chiefs are the only outlier, but every single time, what happens? Those offensive coordinators, those defensive coordinators, those assistant positions, they get hired elsewhere because people want a little piece of what they had going and some of that success. Like, it just kind of it all carries over, and it's all tied in. So, I guess that's all I wanted to kind of add in there. Just a couple other little talking points that I figured were pretty important to consider here. So, that's it, guys. Peace.